So those went into the towers.
So when she said that, you know, it'll grow and then the root vegetables, it'll grow between.
Yep, we're gonna explain all that right now. We're gonna start the tour, everyone. If you wanna just check out up here. Okay, so anybody ever toured the LGM? No LGM tours. Okay, cool. So the greenery is about a couple years in the making, and what we did with the LGM is we would have about incremental iterations. Can we turn off the fans?
Yes. I want to keep that one on.
Yeah, we'll keep the exhaust on so we don't all faint from CO2. Which one is it called?
Overhead fan.
Alright, so quick example. This is the grow controller. This is me not using farmhand and just directly controlling something from here. Just be cautious. These do move. They stand in place, and just be cautious of the plants hanging on the side, please. So like I was mentioning, we would do incremental updates of the LGM about every 6 months or so. But the greenery was a full-blown redesign, which is why it took so long to actually make, because the infrastructure in here is significantly different than it is in the LGM. The most noticeable changes being the moving rack system, which allows you to interchange the spacing between the LEDs and the plants, and it also cuts down on labor time. So if you've seen pictures of the LGM, there were individual prop columns all facing each other with one main aisle down the center. However, this is back-to-back plant panels, which have 5 channels as opposed to 1. So it eliminates the amount of times that you're going back and forth. And the moving racks allow you to actually transplant and harvest in row, as opposed to having to remove each crop column and bring them to the front seedling area to transplant or harvest. So I'm going to start this explanation with the actual container. So one of the other biggest differences between the LGM and the greenery is the fact that we're building these containers from the ground up as opposed to using recycled units. That means that the structural integrity is much greater because it hasn't been used in previous life cycles, and the R value of the insulation is significantly higher too. So this would be, it's either R28 or R26. 28, R28. The LGM was R16, so it's got a much higher insulation value than the LGM. I'm going to go through the cycle of the plant's life to explain how this system works. I am sitting on the seedling table, which I do not recommend because it's not the most food safe thing, but I can't see half of you, so I'm just going to get that height here. This is a stainless steel seedling table. Our previous version was an aluminum seedling table. This is significantly more food safe, and it's just sturdier. We've also raised the height of it, and we've changed the amount of troughs, the amount of seedling trays that you can fit within the troughs. The other difference is you can independently irrigate each trough. So if you wanted to use one strictly for germination, which doesn't require that much irrigation, you could turn off the ebb and flow system for that particular trough. There are also really awesome features that go into this seedling table that were not in the other one. One being, these are removable, the spacers between each of the seedling trays. This makes for cleaning to be significantly easier. I'm also realizing that the fans, the ducting fans right now are also making a lot of noise, so I want to turn those off too. It's the pump. Okay. Can we keep that on? Okay. The recirculator always has to be on. I learned that. Okay. So the thing about this seedling table is that it has a higher capacity for growth than you actually need to supply your cultivation area. And you can use 2 different types of trays, a 200 cell tray or a 288 cell tray, depending on how your planting schedule. You could decide to maybe grow some microgreens in this extra space, or you can just grow some seedlings for sale, even as like an extra revenue source, maybe for local gardeners who need to start their seeds earlier. Behind me are all the nutrient
Delivery tanks.
delivery tanks. Thank you, Colin. We have also streamlined this process from the LGM to the greenery. Instead of there being 8 tanks, 4 for the seedling area and 4 for the cultivation tank, we've just put all the seedling and the cultivation nutrients in 4 tanks. And then based on the programming you have for the nutrients in the seedling tank and the nutrients in the cultivation tank, each doser will dose it appropriately. So moving on to the dosing panels, these are sensors that are constantly taking readings of the water. I have the amount of, it's constantly running water over these sensors to monitor what's going on in the water. So the temperature, the nutrient levels, and the pH levels. And depending on your programming, it's going to be dosing the water accordingly.
Does it measure water in and water out?
So basically, basically the way that it's going to work is there's a recirculator pump that constantly is moving water over those sensors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of delay time between the dosages, so those sensors are then continuing to read that water as it comes back through and take after it mixes, and it kind of takes an aggregate of what is in that tank based on that 20-minute gap, and says, okay, it's still a little low, I'm going to dose some more nutrients.
And you can, if you have the farmhand on your iOS app, you can monitor those through there as well. Way behind me, this is the grow controller that we were talking about. That's that interface if you choose not to go with farmhand. It's ugly. That's all. And it doesn't allow you to do any remote monitoring or remote control from afar. So it's everything that you would be doing in here. So I typically, when I'm in here, I usually go from here. Other people choose to go from farmhand just for convenience, and the interface is much more user-friendly. So working around this space a little bit more. Actually, let's talk about how long seedlings stay in these troughs.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the seedling, so one big difference between the LGM and the greenery is that the LGM had a dedicated germination shelf. So that meant that the seedlings were going to stay down there for 1 week and not get any water, and then move up to the seedling trough where they would be irrigated. Now we germinate and allow them to grow their first true leaves in the same place. So they spend 1 week germinating with the humidity domes on. After that first week, and they've actually started to sprout, we'll remove the humidity domes and allow water to run over the roots. They'll spend 2 weeks getting watered for 5 minutes every 8 hours in these shells before we harvest them, or before we transplant them over into the main grow area in our plant panels.
So the tank, this is a tank that is vertically integrated now into the seedling table, as opposed to it used to be tucked under the table, so it's much easily accessible. You guys know what I mean? And now there's what we call a catch basin. So a lot of our farmers would have stuff just accumulating, whether that's grow plugs or seeds or any types of paper towels. So we just created that there so you could sweep all of your garbage into that catch basin, and then you just remove that and dump it in the trash. It's just one of those convenience things to cut down on irritating labor. And in there, so it's a 38-gallon tank, and there is an autumn. Can you talk about the...
Yeah, so one really nice new thing that we also have integrated here is each tank, meaning the seedling tank and the main tank in the back, both have a level sensor. So that way, if you have your farm hard plumbed to a water source, it'll start to take readings, and when it notices that it gets below a certain point, it's going to start pumping water back into the tank to maintain that optimal amount of water in the tank. So with that, you're really never going to run out of water. Additionally, since this is a closed loop system, water should not be ever exiting the system. We recycle all of the water, so once it goes into the troughs, it actually drains directly back into the tank and gets reused. The tanks are fully turned over roughly about once every 2 to 3 months.
Where are the water filters located for incoming water?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. So in terms of actual filtration systems before it comes in, there's nothing built directly in. So that's when during the onboarding process, I would probably suggest that you get your water tested to make sure that they're, it's not high in something like copper, lead, something like that. And if that is necessary, then you would probably want to go through a reverse osmosis filter.
Is there a water quality testing component or sensor that would keep the machine from
Yeah, that's why I asked that
using
earlier question.
like contaminated water?
Apart from those 6 sensors, no.
How often do people get their water tested though?
Typically once a year.
Yeah. So you want to test the water that you're going to be bringing in, whether you're hard plumbing or you're using a hose or you're toting in water. You just want to again make sure that the water levels are at safe drinking levels.
The old machine did have a built-in RO filter, but we actually found that a lot of farmers did not need it based on what was in the water.
There's a lot of maintenance too.
Answer that question out here. That's a good one.
A little bit.
Oh, the old machine. I was just asking if the old machine had a water, because the old machine did have a water filter on it,
Yeah.
and so they took that out on this
Yeah.
machine. But
Because we found that most people actually did not need the RO filter. It's really dependent on the water source that you're getting it from, which is what we test. We help you get tested in the beginning.
If you want the filter, is it easier to add on?
Yeah, you can. Yep, absolutely. Yep, and it's on the shop again.
That's a good one.
So keeping in this area,